when we come out as Christians, there are certain big publishers that don't want to work with us, and they won't publish Christian books.
All right. Well, welcome to this Lions Den DFW pitch virtual event. So this is one of the things that I'm excited about has been this roundtable because I get to talk to a lot of my friends that I've known for a number of years and fellow believers in our Lord Jesus Christ. And so just excited to have them on the panel here. And so why don't we just go ahead and get started? I'm going to go clockwise from my screen. So Jim, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how many books you've narrated, how long you've been narrating and such?
Okay, my name is Jim Denison and currently live in southern Indiana, just across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. So fortunately, I get to be at least a little bit near a larger city. I've been narrating audiobooks actually full time now since 2015, and been very blessed. Out of the 160 titles that you can find on Audible, during that entire time, perhaps 1 month, I didn't have any work to do, which was great because my basement flooded and I needed to take care of that. But as soon as that was done, boom, the offer came back in again, and it was all good. So feel blessed in that way. Probably, certainly the majority of the work that I do in audiobooks is nonfiction, and probably 75% of it has to do with Christian theology, some of which is really good stuff. Some of it is okay, but it's just been a great ride, and I'm very blessed to know that I'm booked 3 or 4 books out with some really good titles. And fortunately, I've been able to meet actually some of the authors, 2 of which happen to be in Louisville at the seminary that was there. So there's a lot that's challenging about this work, but there's also a lot of joy in it as well. And especially that I get to do and get into the minds and see the conclusions and the reasonings of so many people who have a deep love for the Lord. So I'm just thrilled to be a part of it all, and a part of Two Words Publishing and what's going on with CrossCurrent and such. Just excited, Clayton, about what you're putting together, and happy to be a very, very small part of it. But it's the small things that God can use to do great things.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Let's move on to Pam. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been narrating audiobooks for probably about 10 years, been doing voiceover, commercial voiceover also in addition to that. So I think I have right around 100 books, but I haven't counted them up recently. But I got into it. I love fiction. I love reading. And I've been blessed at having 2 careers that I absolutely love. And God's helped me through this. It was kind of an odd choice, but and of course I met you, and this to me is the best story. My very first audio publishers conference, I had been nominated for one of my first books. I'd been nominated for an audio award for a Christian romance. And you kind of took me under your wing, Clayton, and introduced me to publishers and people that you knew. And I so appreciate it. You exuded the warmth and love of your Christian faith. And I am forever grateful to that.
Thank you, Pam. And we'll touch on what that previous career was in a little bit, because I'm sure our listeners will be very intrigued by that. So we'll move on to Adam.
Hello, I'm Adam, and I narrated my first audiobook in 2005, I think. So it's been quite a while. And then I went got my master's degree in theater and was pursuing stage acting in Chicago mainly, and doing audiobooks at the same time. And then I went full-time kind of voiceover and audiobooks in 2009. So this year I might hit 700 titles total, cruising along, and still doing a little bit of theater. Like, just in fact, this weekend, day after tomorrow, we're opening a play here in Fort Collins, Colorado, where I am. So trying to narrate all day and then run around and screaming and yelling on the stage all night can be a little rough on the voice. But so I still like to do some theater now and then when I can, but it's, once every couple of years because I'm narrating audiobooks full time. And like Pam and Jim said, I'm blessed to do a lot of Christian work for a lot of the Christian publishers. And in fact, that's how I got my start. It was with Oasis Audio, which is a Christian publisher out of the Chicago area there, and did my first, 20 books with them. So yeah, I've always wanted to. When I was a kid, I would say I wanted to read books. When they'd say, "What do you want to do when you grow up, Adam?" I say, "Read books," because that's all I did as a kid. And they're like, "Oh, that's cute. You can't do that for a living. Like, choose something wise." But by the grace of God, here I am reading books out loud for a living. So it's awesome.
Born right on time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
10 years earlier, 20 years earlier, wouldn't have had that capability.
Yep.
And then I'll give a little bit about myself too. Clayton Butcher. I started as an audiobook narrator right around the time that Jim and Pam were. Actually, Pam, I think that APAC was my second APAC. And the first one I had met Jim and Adam. And I think we've got a funny, interesting story. I don't know if we'll get to, Adam, about the first time that we met. Two Christian guys ending up closing down the bar at APAC, our annual conference.
That's hard to do.
It is.
Yeah,
No alcohol involved, or police involvement.
we were overdosing on prayer that night, if I remember. So
that was a good night. I got to introduce my coach to brilliance at that one. Anyway, so got my start again about the same time as Jim and Pam. I've actually narrated a lot fewer titles than any of my esteemed guests here. I think I've done about maybe 80 books, but then started publishing audiobooks with Two Words Publishing, then later Black Hills Audiobooks and Vision Audiobooks. And then again, there's an origin story for CrossCurrent that we don't need to get into in this panel, but so that's basically where I came from. I don't do much narrating anymore because of running the publishing companies and now CrossCurrent concurrently. And so there's a little bit of background about us. Okay, so now Pam, we'll have you go last because you'll win this question. So Adam, you touched on this a little bit. Why don't we start with you? What did you do before you started narrating? So you mentioned that you did some theater.
Oh, this is for me, not for Pam?
For Adam, yes. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, I already kind of answered that. I got my undergrad degree in theater because growing up, I was like, well, okay, I can't read books for a living, but I want to tell stories. And my grandparents met in the theater, were actors. My parents met in the theater as actors. I'm like, well, go into theater. That's what you do. It's a way to tell stories from stage and maybe get paid a little bit. Theater's not known for the big bucks. So I got my undergraduate degree in theater in Illinois, and I moved to Chicago and started acting on stage there. And that's where I started getting into a little bit of voiceover and was like, oh, wait, there are these things called audiobooks. And I had grown up listening because my parents had been split up. So I'd grown up listening to my father from California would send me cassette tapes of himself reading kids' books. So I would grow up listening to his voice on these cassette tapes. And then he tragically passed away in an untimely car accident when I was in high school. And that's when I started doing theater. So it wasn't really like for him or whatever, but it was part of my journey of like, okay, I'm going to do what my dad did, acting, which is a great background for audiobooks because audiobooks is really just acting in this audio format. But as I always tell people, it's the oldest form of performance that we know. I mean, thousands of years ago, we were sitting around the campfire telling stories. That's what we did, and that's, and coming from our Christian perspective, before anything was written down in the Old Testament, they were told orally, like it's this oral storytelling and the greatest story ever told, etc. So for me, finding audiobooks in Chicago was a culmination of all those things. It's acting, but it's storytelling. So it didn't really look back from there. So I did a lot of the actor random jobs, dressing up and for crazy things and corporate events and the day jobs and the serving tables and all that stuff that a lot of actors do to make ends meet. And again, I'm blessed now that I don't have to do that. I may have to again. We don't know how things are going to go, but to do just only storytelling right now. So yeah, that's my background.
I want to touch on one thing that you said there, go a different direction for a moment. One of the things that I have always thought was really cool and special and unique about the voiceover and audiobook world, especially audiobooks, is how our voices can live on beyond us, and how we are, when we are speaking, especially with Christian titles, we can still be ministering to the Lord decades down the line after we have passed. So Adam, what you mentioned about your dad made me think of that, and something that from the very beginning I've thought, wow, this is really cool. And then a while later, when we felt God telling us to start Two Words Publishing, it was a verse was given to me: "Let this be recorded for a generation to come, that a people yet to be created will praise the Lord." And that's kind of our verse for all of our work. So anyway, Adam, one more thing. I seem to recall something about a semi-professional or professional ultimate frisbee league.
Yes. So one of my other passions, other than acting and narrating, is, well, two things. Ultimate frisbee I've played since college, and a lot of people don't know what ultimate frisbee is. Google it. You'll see highlights on YouTube, but it's a sport played with a frisbee, similar to soccer in the amount of running and sprinting involved. So it's very intense. But I've kept doing it in my old age. So now I'm in the grandmasters category, which is, 45-year-olds still running around on the field like we're spring chickens. But just this last summer, we made it to the World Championships in Ireland, which is every 4 years. It's kind of the World Cup of frisbee. So we got to take the whole family to Ireland and play in the Grandmasters division in Ireland with the Colorado team that I'm on, and took 4th place, which is great because 4th place in the world is great, but we also missed the medal, the bronze medal, by one spot, which is a little disappointing, but that was great. So I'm still doing that. And then also when I hit 40, instead of, buying a fast red car or something, I decided to start running ultra marathons. So now I'm training for a 50-mile race in Leadville, Colorado, coming up this July. So yeah,
I don't know if we want to talk to you anymore, Adam.
Yeah, really.
The lung power.
yeah.
Oh, that's a good point.
But I don't want to go too far down that rabbit trail because it'll take too long. But yeah, the ultra running and long distance running has really been very meaningful to my faith and my storytelling and what I'm listening to while I'm running and the story that I'm writing, like, of my life while I'm running. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there that have been very transformative for my life. So yeah, I suggest everyone go out for a run, even if it's a mile. It's amazing.
I don't know if I'll ever take you up on that, but Jim,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Background. I grew up in Florida. My father was a pastor for a church, and I guess I kind of followed in those footsteps, even though my dad always told me, to kind of study things out for yourself, think for yourself, don't do things just because I was doing them. But I ended up on a previous career of 40 years of what I call getting paid by churches. But I worked in various capacities of everything from youth ministry to college ministry, campus ministry, to overseas missions. And then I was involved for about 3 years in leadership training of pastors and students in throughout the Caribbean in particular, was my primary focus. But then also after that was working with the local churches as their, what we would call in our tribe, pulpit minister. And I don't know how you minister to a pulpit, but basically I was their preacher in a couple of different locations for a total of about 20 plus years. So along the way, got undergraduate degree in Bible, a couple of graduate degrees, another one in Bible, but one in management and human relations, with a focus on communications, and then ended up, was able, fortunately, to get my doctorate in many years. I think it was 1996, so I've had it for a while. But all of that, and that was in hermeneutics and homiletics. So, I've had this background of studying scripture and developing faith in myself, first of all, and faith in other people for a number of years. But then there came a point where I thought, is there a way that I might be able to teach far more people than just a couple of hundred that sit in front of me from Sunday to Sunday? And, a few individual studies, while I know that can have a great impact, I just felt like at that point in my life, I wanted to be able to do more. And as it turned out, there was an ad that came through my email that I was about a class being offered down in DC. I was living in Maryland at the time. It was called Getting Paid to Talk. And I go, I like to talk, and I'd sure like to get paid to do it. So anyway, it was a general introduction to the voiceover industry as a whole, but audiobooks were a component of that. And so it took a couple of years, but put together the resources to be able to launch a business. And I thought, for the first year, I wasn't going to have any work at all. It was just going to be promotion. But as it turned out, I worked for about somewhere between 40 and 50 clients everywhere around the world, from Germany to Singapore, throughout the United States and such. So it was a good first launch, but I still had this 5-year goal of narrating audiobooks exclusively. And so finally, somebody at a business networking meeting that I was attending locally, they said, "Do you know this guy? He's in your town and he's been narrating audiobooks for a while." And so I said, no. And so I researched him, got a hold of him, sat down with him, paid honestly for a couple of beers for him. But it was some of the best money I've ever spent, because after an hour together, he said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's the plan. You're going to save your pennies and you're going to join the Audio Publishers Association. Then you're going to save more pennies and you're going to have me be your coach for a while. And then you're going to save even more and you're going to go to APAC in New York City. And when you get there, I will have called ahead to several publishers and let them know to look for you." And I'm going, okay, this is good. So from basically that time on, I actually started just practice narrating over a website called LibriVox.org, and just to feel what it was like. And I liked it. And so by the time I went to my first APAC, I was meeting people and all of a sudden getting offers to do books and such. And it's kind of been history from there. But it's been fun to focus more specifically in the nonfiction that I narrate with theologically oriented books, because there's just a lot that I'm able to bring, I feel, from my background into understanding things. It's fun. It's kind of funny because as Adam and Pam will tell you, when you know something and yet your proofer comes back and says, "Oh no, you made a mistake in pronouncing this," and I'm having to send them my research and, and say, no, I kind of know some of the language here of the Greek and some of the Hebrew and stuff. Just kind of trust me on this, would you? And so, anyway, that's kind of my background. I do some other fun things. I'm maybe not like Adam or Pam. The two of you may have some tremendous stamina when it comes to your voice in recording. I get about 2-3 hours, 4 hours, maybe at the most, before I'm kind of giving out. So I start recording usually about 6 a.m. And so I'm finished up, by noon after doing a little bit of editing and such. So I get out around this other area in southern Louisiana, around the Louisville, Kentucky area, driving for Uber. And it's a way, I mean, after talking to yourself all morning long, it's nice to be able to get out and talk with some real people. So that's cool. What I do. That's what I do. And I have just met an amazing cross section of people over about the last 8.5 years that I've been driving for Uber, both in Maryland and then more so over where I am now. And just yesterday, I was talking with a fellow who had just gotten his PhD from Asbury Theological Seminary here, and he said he had done his dissertation on Matthew chapters 23 and 24. And if people don't know what that's about, it's a lot of kind of eschatological talk that's going on there, and ideas and end time stuff. And anyway, as he talked, I think he was really surprised to find an Uber driver who could converse kind of on his level, although he was probably far smarter than I was. But he was from Nigeria, and he had been teaching in the seminary in Lagos there before coming to Asbury, and now he's going back to teach again. And we prayed together because he is so focused on and has the integrity to want to just stay with the Word of God and not go with the popular trends or ideas or anything else. He says, when I studied the Word on this, I know I'm going back to teach in the seminary, and I am going to face opposition, if not persecution. And it was just nice to be able to pray with him. And so there are things like that even driving for Uber, you can get some really odd people, but you can also find moments that are very interesting. I had one. I don't know if y'all are interested in this or not. You edit this out. But
I'm actually gonna. We haven't even gotten to our biggest questions yet.
Oh yes.
And so
sorry, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Along, so
that's what you needed to do. Cut me off. That's great. I'm okay.
We're all storytellers.
Yes.
Me being the least of these, but
okay, I'm out of here.
Real quick. It's basically a mic drop moment. So what did you do before narrating?
Well, after getting a degree in art from Colorado State University in Fort Collins, where Adam is, I decided I wanted to learn to fly. And I learned to fly before women worked with the airlines, but I finally got a job with the airlines, one of the first women airline pilots. So I ended up finally, after a long career, flying 747 captain internationally for Delta. And during that time, I was asked to do a national Tylenol commercial. Kind of like when I get a headache in the cockpit, I can't just go home and take a nap. So that ended up very lucrative, but they weren't exactly beating a path to my door to be on camera. But I was asked to do a couple of commercials for Northwest/Delta, and then to narrate some of the training videos. And then the union asked me to narrate some things. So I did. I had my first introduction, I guess, if you will, to voiceover sporadically while I was still flying airlines. I had to retire early because I've had multiple joint replacements. But when I retired early, I was looking for something to kind of take up the slack. And I felt like it was truly a God moment. I prayed about it a lot. And as I was going over decisions, I got a call from the Airline Pilots Association to narrate a video for them. And it had been several years. And I said, okay, well, maybe that's a sign, and started doing it and fell in love with it. And that's why I say, God blessed me. I love flying airplanes and I miss it a lot. But to fall into a career like this was the biggest blessing in the world. And as I mentioned, my Audie nomination, I didn't win, but was a Christian romance. And my first big contract with the major publishers, I think, was through your introduction, Clayton, to Dave Andrews at Brilliance. And I narrated 12 of Madeline L'Engle's nonfiction titles, which was fascinating to me because it did bring my faith into what I loved, into my career. And I narrated those, and then it just kind of snowballed from there.
Okay. That's a good segue into the key question for this whole thing was how important is your faith, your personal faith in Jesus, to your narration? So how does it, there's a lot of, I'm sure a lot of aspects that what kind of work you do, what kind of work you don't do, quality of your work. So that's really the key question that I've been really intrigued by. Looking forward to the answers for this. So why don't we go Adam again?
Put me on the spot first. It's kind of a hard question because it is the question. It's like asking me, well, what does being a Christian mean for your life? Like, what does that do? Like, because I am a narrator, that's how God like created me and has led me to this industry. So like asking like how my faith affects my career, I mean, it's just all intertwined, but I will attempt. Well, there's so many different aspects of it. And one aspect is the sheer kind of like business, self-employed aspect. Like to be a Christian and to be self-employed, like requires me to have so much more trust. You know, to not have a steady paycheck coming my way, to not be guaranteed any kind of insurance or the steady job. Like, you know, those of us who are self-employed in any form, if you're a freelance illustrator or something, you wake up every day and you're unemployed again until the next job comes along and the next publisher hopefully hires you. But like, it's just daily, weekly trust and learning to trust that, you know, God has us. And you would think after 25 years of this that I would be better at it, right? But sometimes, yeah, sometimes no. So it's just interesting because I married a missionary, my wife. She was living in China at the time that we met, and we dated long distance. She was in China. And she's like, I never thought I'd marry an actor, but there's so many similarities in trust. Like as a missionary, you just go into this different new place and you have to just place your faith in God. And as an actor, you know, like it's just this new thing every day. You got to trust that the stories are going to come. So when we write our memoirs, eventually it'll probably be called The Actor and the Missionary or something. But so my faith, yeah, does it inform the titles I choose? Yes and no, because as a Christian, I want to tell the human story. And the human story includes Christian stories, includes atheist stories, includes anti-Christian stories, because those are all people struggling with their own faith. So I feel honored to be able to tell their story, and I can bring something to it that maybe wasn't, because it's all part of the great story. So what fascinates and really helps me grow as a Christian, especially when I narrate Christian work, is when I get to narrate stuff that I maybe personally disagree with. Because how many of us in your daily walk, how many of the average Christian in the country is forced, quote unquote, I'm hired to believe in something that I may not believe in. Because I think for me, the number one quality of an actor or a narrator is to believe in the story. So I get a book, maybe it's something not quite from my faith tradition. Maybe it's written by a Greek Orthodox person, and I'm not a Greek Orthodox Christian. But for the purpose of this book, I need to believe that I am. So I get into this mode like, yep, that's what I believe. And then I tell their story with full belief and honoring their work and their words. And then I'm done with the book and I'm like, whoa, that was weird to walk in someone else's shoes. And I think like, as a society, as Christians and as Americans, how great would it be to like help everyone walk in other people's shoes and have that empathy for other people. And I think that like really helps bring the kingdom of Christ here, in the here and now. So I'll tell my wife, I'm like, oh, I got this. Oh, I'm so great. I got this audition for this book. I totally disagree with everything this guy thinks. It's going to be awesome because I'm going to get to see his point of view. So for me, that's what I love about, narrating Christian work, is the diversity of opinion out there and stuff like that. Non-Christian work. Yeah. I mean, one of the questions I think we may, and I always get this from non-actors or non-audiobook narrators when they find out what I do, they're like, oh, have you ever turned anything down? That's always, they're always curious, like, ooh, what have you turned down? And I've only ever turned down 2 books, one of which, I don't know if I need to go into detail about them, but it was interesting because they were both in like the same month, a number of years ago, both the first book from big companies that I'd never worked with. So there's a whole nother level of the business aspect of it. Like, big publisher comes to you with this book that you've always wanted to work for them, but then you look at it and you're like, I don't think I should do this. So one of those books I turned down, and the publisher was like, oh, totally understand, not your thing. Here's this other one. How's this? Like, that one's great, sure. And the other one, never heard from them again to this day. So it's like, well, which one would I rather work with? So yeah, I won't go into detail about why I turned those down unless you're curious. But there are certain things that I wouldn't want to narrate for faith-based reasons, maybe even non-faith-based reasons. But I know a lot of our compatriots in the narrating industry use pseudonyms, and I don't think there's anything like fundamentally wrong with that. But I made my decision years ago to be like, in my mind, if there's a book that I have questions about, or I don't want my name attached to it for some reason, then I probably shouldn't be narrating it. So for me, I'm like, I'm just going to use my name. And if I turn down a book, and you got to trust that God will bring another project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Pam.
Yeah.
How?
Well, my faith is really paramount. And more so now, I think. I have turned down books. I don't do erotica. Some of them I've read, I'd probably laugh in the middle of it, some of them. But I don't do erotica because I also do a lot of Christian books, and I don't want my name associated with it. And I love Adam's idea of, and I had a great pseudonym I wanted to use, Sky Franklin. Franklin's my husband's middle name, but I thought that was great. But I've never used it because, again, if I don't want my name associated with it, exactly like Adam said, I don't think I want to do it. So I have turned down erotica, and I've turned down a couple of political titles that they're very antithesis of not only I am conservative, those beliefs, but also the antithesis of what I believe in my faith, that the Gospels say. So I've turned down a couple of those. And I turned down one, like a thriller that was top dollar, but it was just gore and violence and just too much of that. Some of it I do, and I use words that I've never said out loud in front of my parents, only on the golf course occasionally. But I have no problems with doing that sort of thing if it adds to the story. But this was senseless violence, and I just didn't think it added anything to society, much less the story. So, yeah. And I love doing Christian books because I do feel like I learned so much. I did a Buddhist book called for Michelle Cobb called Buddha Speaks. And it was fascinating. I learned so much about it. And I don't think that harmed my faith at all, but I learned a lot. So.
Thank you. Jim.
Yeah, I'm just, all I could do is piggyback on what Adam and Pam have both said, but I mean, there are books that there are moments of disagreement and such, but I think it helps bring clarity to my faith when I read those books, because I've got to think through things again. And so I don't become stale just by reading materials that I would happen to agree with. It's interesting. I had one author give me a call when he found out I was selected as the narrator. And his main concern was because it was coming from a Christian perspective, but it was very politically charged. And he wanted to know if, kind of my background and such. And so in the phone conversation, I just said, look, I am not here to present my point of view. I am here to speak what you understand to be true. And I want to do it in the very best possible way that I can do it. And I want the people listening to hear you and not me as the narrator. And so he appreciated that. And I don't know how the book actually, I've heard, samples of it, but I don't know how it turned out in terms of popularity or sale or anything of that sort. But yeah, I mean, faith, personal faith does inform what you're doing, but it's a personal faith that's not afraid of things that you might not be wholly in sync with theologically in application of life. There are things that I might consider for my life and others that I would want to talk them into, exploring things that could be of a higher priority than maybe what some of these books are presenting. And I kind of look at it as you dig in the dirt sometimes to be able to find the diamonds. And I think that's kind of what any book is. There's not a single book besides, scriptures themselves that's going to present everything 100% totally accurately as representative of God, what God really wants us to hear. There's just too many variations of people coming to read the scriptures and come to conclusions. But at the same time, as I'm reading through them, I can always pick out something, even if they're quoting somebody else that they disagree with, saying, "Oh, this is what these clowns are saying over here," but let me tell you the real position you need. That may be that quote that the author is giving that becomes the gem that I want to hang on to. So yeah, personal faith does affect the quality of the work, just because there are some things that are said that are near and dear to me. And I've done some of the older works from 17th, 18th century pastors and theologians and such. And my goodness, the passion that those men and women had is just so deep that you can't help but lose yourself as you're telling that story. And it comes out in your voice. People say, make sure you're smiling when you narrate because people can hear that smile. Well, they can hear what's on your heart as well as just the words that you're speaking in the tone that you give and so forth. And it's not just good acting. It's hopefully good life being brought to the surface as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we as Christians can bring to, especially our Christian narration of Christian books, is it's not just us doing this. It's not just our own talent that obviously that God has given us, that we have enhanced through the work and the study and everything, but we also have the Spirit that can speak, that can empower us and help to speak through us. And so I think that's something that is, we don't only, as Stewart's Publishing, we don't only use Christian narrators. I picked the right person for the project, but often I know that a Christian narrator is going to be able to bring something that that others will not, because of the background, because of really theological stuff and a whole lot of terminology and things that Greek and Hebrew. I mean, that's one thing. Jim is a go-to for that, and Bob, who was not able to be here today, was supposed to be on this call but had an emergency surgery. You know, you're my go-to guys for that, but it's not just because of that. It's because I know that in casting Christians to do ministry, that there's just something extra, and we know that is our faith. That is the Spirit that is working in us. And another thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if any of you want to touch on it real quick here. I think we're over a half hour. Oh, yeah, we're definitely over a half hour. So we might end up cutting some of this to make sure to get to the some of this later, these later answers. But Jim, you mentioned that that you want, in talking with that author, you want the listeners to hear the author.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, you touched on this as well. It is telling their story. There's a number of narrators that we all know, Johnny and Scott, and a number of others that will say the authors speak the author's truth, which I kind of take issue with. But from a theological standpoint, there is truth with a capital T, and other things that are against that are not truth. But I understand the point that we're trying to make sure that we are representing the author as well as we can, and their viewpoint as well as we can. But one of the things that I love is when an author is a Christian and writing a Christian book, it's really not the small a author that we are representing. It's the author of life, the author of creation, the author of our faith, the founder and perfecter of our faith that we are representing. Any thoughts on that?
For sure. I feel like that's when I do Christian books, especially, I feel like the passion for that is in a small way, a way to fulfill the Great Commission. Whether or not, again, as I believe, every single little tenet of the book, if it's showing God's love to the world, then gosh, what better way can we do it? My pastor, Joby Martin, had a book launch party last night that I was not able to go to, but his books, the first one was If the Tomb is Empty, and then his phrase is anything is possible. He has 2 books. And I thought, wow, what a way to multiply the discipling of people. So I've felt that strongly. The book that I got from 2 words too, A Widow's Journey by Gail Roper, with a Christian bent to how this woman went through widowhood. It ripped me apart. It was so passionate, but gosh, what a way to bring people who've had that hurt to Christ. I really feel passionately about that. And I try to, as you touched on, being a Christian means you have values too, and ethics. Maybe you work hard, you want to do your best, no matter what the title is, and you want to be true to that author. But I don't know, we do it all with God's help. Don't know where we'd be without him.
Jim?
I was just thinking of a book that has been the favorite, probably, that of all the books that I've done, but it's called When Loving Him is Hurting You. And when I did it, it was just different. You talked, Clayton, about the Spirit leading you, and being able to, if it's something that God really wants people to hear, he'll find a way even to take the writings that have flaws to them and get them to hear what truth he needs them to hear. That is his job, not mine. And in this particular book, it was about women, primarily women, who were married to narcissistic men. And if you happen to go on Audible and search for that book and read the comments about the book, it to me is humbling. First of all, that there's only 2, I think, that I've ever read out of the hundreds of reviews on that book that mention the narrator. But the rest are women saying to the author, that spoke to me. Now I can identify things. Now I know I have a plan. I know how to proceed. And this was very much Christian based. And so, but it was done in such a way that it was kind of like the Narnia Chronicles, or, the Hobbit, or the Lord of the Rings, a grand story that behind it tells of magnificent good versus evil, and redemption, and friendship, and bonds, and relationship, and all that. And it was just heartening. It was just heartening to know that so many were hearing his voice rather than mine. And I think that, to me, is what I try to strive for when it comes to narration. Again, agree with everything. Are there major theological things that I wouldn't narrate? I really haven't come across anything in particular. Yes, there's a lot I disagree with. I could sit down and we could talk Bible. I could talk Bible with these authors who are probably a lot smarter than me, but I feel like I could get down and talk with them. And but at the same time, there's going to be something there that talking about being cast for different things. And Adam and Pam, I don't know what your experience is in this, but I rarely am sent books now after these several years that are really outside the realm of what casting directors for the various publishers want me to narrate. Mm-hmm. Because I think we've developed a relationship. We know each other. And I think that's kind of one of the good things that's going to be true for CrossCurrent. And I know working Clayton with you at 2 Words, I mean, we just been on the same page about a number of things from the very start, but others who may not be coming at it from a Christian publishing perspective, they get to know you. And, but there's still a lot of stuff out there that needs to be heard. That's not going to be necessarily read by people because they don't know where to find it to start with. But if they can come to a platform like this and they can say, oh, that's a topic I'm interested in. And we've got the people who have that background and that sense of faith and energy and passion and a comprehension of what's being shared by the authors. I think we can provide an invaluable service, not just to people, but to the kingdom. And that's what's most important. Trying to figure out not who the author is, but who God is. And that's what I really want to try to offer people in doing this work.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Adam, anything to add on that?
I can't come after those words. No, just I would reiterate what Jim and Pam says. Author with a big A. Yeah. It makes me think though of the difference of the few times I've gotten actually like hired to record scripture itself. And the difference of like, I got to do the book of Isaiah for the new NIV translation a couple of years ago. And then 5 of the books for the New Living Translation when they did their updated version a couple of years ago. But it's a different thing to be like, okay, I have to get through the entire book of Genesis today. Like, and then I got to go to the sci-fi shoot 'em up in the afternoon. As Christians in our reflection, journaling, quiet time, whatever, you can chew over half a chapter of Genesis for a week, but it's another thing to just like go all the way through it in one day. Like that's another thing. So it was very interesting, but it was definitely a different sense of narration of like, okay, this is the big A, the author with the big A. This isn't someone's even someone's interpretation of it or commentary on it. So as a Christian getting to narrate the Bible itself, and I wish Bob were here because he's narrated the whole Bible, I think 3 times now or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. and I've never gotten to do the whole Bible. I would love to someday, but as a Christian narrator, that's a whole nother ballgame, you know. And it was a blessing to be able to do that. But again, yes, we bring our work to that. But like you were saying with somebody, Jim was saying maybe about the author, like you do want to step aside and let the author speak there, really, and not you, you know, and be that mirror for the Holy Spirit. So yeah, I'm going to stop talking. That's all I got.
Well, we are well past the initial half hour that I was thinking, so we might as well fill a little more time and shoot for 45 minutes or an hour. If you guys have another 5-10 minutes here.
A few minutes.
Okay. So I think we touched on this a little bit, but faith affecting the quality of our work. You know, as I'm drawing a blank. Is it Colossians 3:16? Oh, Jim, help me out here. Work is unto the Lord and not unto men.
Oh yeah. Yeah. When you do your work, do it as to the Lord and
Yes.
not as to men. Mhm.
Right.
Sure.
I think that's something that as Christians, we don't want to give substandard work. We want to be able to do our best because of our faith. And so I think that is just something that wanted to make sure to call out. And so any other thoughts on that, or how
I think that,
comes your preparation?
yeah, I think that, well, obviously with anything that we do, we try to do it to the glory of God. And even a murder mystery, it might not have anything to do with a Christian faith, but you try to do the best you can. And you try to, again, give the author the feeling that you value his words and his or her words, and you're doing, I guess, that you're a Christian and you have Christian values and you want it to be good. You want it to be the best because you're reflecting talents that he gave you, that aren't your own.
Yeah. I think our quality of work has to be as top notch as we can give it all the time for whatever work we happen to be, material we happen to be working with. And we represent someone. I mean, it's been the complaint of like Christian movie making, that so many Christian movies are just, yeah. And so now there's, you see this movement of people saying, let's really make something substantial and good and quality and such that matches, what Hollywood and Atlanta or wherever is putting out these days. That's expensive. That's hard to do. But it's just like Clayton with you and CrossCurrent trying to launch something new that's going to be on par with what's already out there. Hey, it's going to take investment. It's going to take a lot of prayer, which has already gone into this, a lot of sacrifice, which we know has already gone into this. But it's going to take a lot of people stepping up. I mean, now it seems the popular things for movies, at least, and documentaries that people want to produce is to do fundraising, GoFundMe type of thing. But I think we have enough. I think we have enough Christians out there who have been blessed, by God with great herds and flocks and such, whatever, big bank accounts that need to start looking at places that can multiply the effectiveness of getting the message of God out to as many people as possible, and in ways that they will chew on. It's kind of like listening to a parable of Jesus. There's not a lot of theology per se, but there's a point, and it points people in the right direction if they will just take the time to sort of mull it over. Let me think about this for a while, and then let the Spirit do his work of, Jesus said the work of the Spirit is to convict the world of sin and righteousness and sound judgment. And so first of all, what's going wrong? Number two, what can you do right? And number three, discernment to be able to judge between what's the best course of action to take. And so I think we have the tools and the ability to be able to do that with the platform that we're seeing develop here.
Well, thank you, Jim. Any other closing thoughts?
Well, I've talked way too much, but I do think that between Two Words and CrossCurrent, these are publishers that we need. Oasis is another one that's Christian oriented, but we need these venues because, as I think we've all probably found out a little bit when we come out as Christians, there are certain big publishers that don't want to work with us, and they won't publish Christian books. So we need someone with the integrity and with the courage to stand up and be a Christian book publisher. And I applaud you for that, Clayton, and CrossCurrent. And this is something that we desperately need in the audiobook community and in paper books, print books, ebooks, but definitely in the audiobook community.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you, Pam. Adam, Jim, Pam, thank you so much for being a part of this. Privileged to call you friends and brothers and sister in Christ, and I really appreciate the time.